Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to do a brief survey of the Old Testament. So, the Old Testament is an important part of Christian theology and composes the first 39 books of the Protestant Bible. There are some Christians who think they only need to read the New Testament. So, do Christians need to read or concern themselves with the Old Testament? Today we will discuss several reasons why we should read and study the Old Testament. One is creation and purpose, the other one is covenant. And third is the need for a Savior. Four is who is the true Messiah. And we'd also get to see miracles and wonders. All right. So on to our first reason. We should read the Old Testament because it tells us the story of creation and the purpose God had for creating man. We read about Adam and Eve and the fall from grace through original sin. We learn about an enemy who wants to hinder God's plan. We discover the nature of man and his free will. And we see the first prophecy of a coming Savior who will defeat that enemy. And second reason we must study the Old Testament is because it teaches us about a concept which is virtually unknown in modern society. It teaches us about covenant and how our God is a covenant-keeping God. As we read along through the entirety of the Old Testament, we discover that God keeps his covenant. From Noah, Abraham, and David, throughout the scriptures, we can learn what it means to be in covenant with God. So how can we truly trust the covenant Jesus mediated for us with God if we don't understand the true depths of the meaning that's contained in covenant? So the third imperative we learn from the Old Testament is that all of mankind has fallen short and needs a Savior. Even the most righteous of people, Noah and Abraham, failed to be sin-free. Even David, who was a man after God's own heart, was flawed and sinful. He committed adultery and then murdered Bathsheba's husband to cover up a resulting pregnancy. We learn from our own shortcomings and unrighteousness through the law. We learn how our just reward is death and separation from God. We learn about atonement and sacrifice. We also learn that sacrifice of animals is insufficient and we need a Savior. So how do we know who that promised Savior will be? How will we recognize the true Messiah? How will I know this Messiah is teaching in accordance to the will of God? The Old Testament contains answers to these questions. Through careful study of the Scriptures, we find prophecy and typology which paint a clear picture of the Messiah. In John 1:40 through 42, Andrew tells Peter, "We have found the Messiah." How does Andrew know? The New Testament was still a few decades from being written. Andrew knew because of the Old Testament Scriptures, known by the Jews as the Tanakh. It is believed that Jesus fulfilled at least 300 prophecies and maybe as many as 400. So, in the Old Testament, we also see some of the greatest miracles and wonders performed by God to protect his people. God brought plagues to Egypt to teach Pharaoh, the God King, that Yahweh was the Lord of creation. He made a path of escape for the Israelites through the Red Sea. God provided food and water for them in the desert. From Genesis through Malachi, we see the power of God. When we view these wonders, we should be inspired, for we are partakers in a new and better covenant with God, who does not change, with a God who concerns himself with his beloved children. So why would we not want to know all that we can of who God is? If we fail to examine the Old Testament and view it through New Testament eyes, we will surely miss a key part of who God is and who we are. Thank you.